The flash of cameras was nothing new to Sandra Bullock as she exited the upscale Beverly Hills restaurant that evening. What was unusual was the small figure huddled in the shadows of the alley beside it. A young girl, no more than 12, with hollow cheeks and tattered clothes, was digging through the restaurant's discarded food containers. Sandra paused, telling her security team to wait as she approached the child. "Are you hungry?" Sandra asked, her voice gentle. The girl startled, nearly dropping the half-eaten bread roll she'd salvaged. "I haven't eaten since yesterday," the girl whispered, her eyes downcast with shame. Without hesitation, Sandra took off her designer jacket, wrapped it around the shivering child's shoulders, and guided her back toward the restaurant's entrance. "Let's get you a proper meal," she said, ignoring the surprised looks from the staff and remaining patrons. What Sandra didn't notice was a group of diners surreptitiously recording the entire encounter on their phones. By morning, the videos had gone viral, not with praise for her compassion, but with vicious accusations. "Hollywood elite Sandra Bullock stages fake charity moment with paid actress," screamed one headline. "Bullock's publicity stunt backfires," declared another. Social media erupted with thousands of scathing comments. "Did you see how conveniently that was timed with her new movie release? That homeless girl was wearing better shoes than my daughter. These celebrities will do anything for attention." The restaurant owner joined the fray, claiming Sandra had arranged the entire scenario beforehand and had disrupted his business. "She brought that girl to my restaurant's back alley. My staff saw her car drop the child off minutes before she coincidentally found her." Within 48 hours, the backlash had become a tsunami. Talk show hosts debated Sandra's obvious publicity stunt. Former fans burned movie memorabilia in YouTube videos. Producers began quietly distancing themselves from upcoming projects with her. Sandra, who had simply wanted to help a hungry child, found herself at the center of a ruthless cancellation campaign. She remained silent as her representatives advised, but the damage was spreading. The girl had disappeared, likely frightened by the sudden attention, leaving Sandra unable to even prove the authenticity of their encounter. What no one knew was that in an apartment across town, another Hollywood legend was watching this unfold with growing anger. Keanu Reeves set down his morning coffee, his jaw tightening as he scrolled through the vicious comments attacking his longtime friend. Unlike the public, he knew the truth about Sandra Bullock, and he wasn't going to stand by while she was destroyed for an act of kindness. Long before the current controversy, Sandra Bullock had built a reputation in Hollywood not just for her acting talents, but for her quiet philanthropy. For nearly 2 decades, she had donated millions to disaster relief efforts, from Hurricane Katrina to the 2010 Haiti earthquake. What few people knew was that she insisted on anonymity for many of her largest contributions, believing that charity should be about helping others, not personal publicity. The morning after the restaurant incident, Sandra sat in her living room surrounded by her management team, watching in disbelief as the narrative spiraled beyond control. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I just wanted to help her. I didn't even know anyone was filming." Her publicist, Richard, sighed heavily. "It's the timing, Sandra. Your movie premieres next week. People are cynical about celebrities these days. So I should have just walked past a hungry child?" Sandra asked, her frustration evident. "What kind of person would that make me?" The girl Sandra had tried to help was named Lily. At 14, she had been living on and off the streets for months after escaping an abusive foster home. That night, hunger had driven her to search through the restaurant's discarded food, something she'd done many times before. When Sandra approached her, Lily's first instinct had been fear, not hope. Now, Lily was hiding in a youth shelter across town, terrified by the sudden spotlight. The shelter director, Elena, watched as the young girl huddled in a corner with a tattered backpack, refusing to speak to anyone. "She's been like this since she arrived last night," Elena told her colleague. "Says everyone's looking for her, that she's in trouble for something to do with a famous person." Meanwhile, the public's reaction intensified. A deep-fake video surfaced, appearing to show Sandra instructing the girl on what to say. Though quickly debunked by technology experts, the damage was done. Even people who had initially defended her began questioning her motives. At a cafe in downtown Los Angeles, two former fans discussed the controversy over lunch. "I always thought she was different from other celebrities," said one, stirring her coffee disappointedly. "Guess they're all the same, just using charity for publicity." Her friend nodded. "My sister works for a nonprofit, and she says the real humanitarians in Hollywood never get caught on camera doing their good deeds." Outside the cafe, a billboard for Sandra's upcoming film was defaced with spray paint. The studio executives were in panic mode, with early projections suggesting the movie would bomb at the box office. Some were already discussing replacing Sandra with another actress for the planned sequel. The restaurant owner, Thomas Whitaker, had become a minor celebrity himself, appearing on morning shows to share his insider perspective. What viewers didn't know was that Whitaker's restaurant had been struggling financially, and the controversy was bringing him more publicity than he'd had in years. "She had her security team block the alley before she found the girl," he claimed on a popular talk show. "One of my waiters even overheard her discussing camera angles." By the third day, Sandra had stopped checking social media or watching television. The constant attacks had become too painful. She sat alone in her garden, questioning everything about her career and public life. "Maybe I should have just called social services instead of getting involved personally," she murmured to herself, though in her heart she knew she would make the same choice again. Across the city, organizations that had previously received anonymous donations from Sandra began receiving calls from journalists investigating her pattern of publicity-seeking charity. Administrators who had respected her wishes for privacy now faced difficult decisions about whether to protect her confidentiality or set the record straight. One person, however, had seen enough. In his modernist home in the Hollywood Hills, Keanu Reeves picked up his phone and dialed a number few people had access to. It was time to reach out to his old friend and colleague, and to remind the world about the power of truth and second chances. Keanu Reeves had never been comfortable with the spotlight that came with fame. Unlike many of his Hollywood peers, he traveled by subway, waited in lines, and gave up his seat on buses. What few people knew was that Keanu had been secretly funding children's hospitals for years after his sister's battle with leukemia. He understood Sandra's philosophy of quiet giving because he lived by the same code. When he saw the media frenzy surrounding his friend, something in him snapped. He remembered working with Sandra on Speed decades earlier, witnessing firsthand her kindness toward everyone on set, from leading actors to the lowest-paid crew members. After leaving several messages, Keanu finally reached Sandra on her private line. Her voice sounded hollow, defeated in a way he'd never heard before. "Keanu, I appreciate the call, but there's nothing anyone can do," she said. "The narrative is set. I'm the celebrity who exploits homeless children for publicity. That's not who you are, and it's not how this ends," Keanu replied, his characteristic calm carrying a rare edge of determination. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened that night, Sandra. Every detail." As Sandra recounted the story, Keanu took notes. The restaurant's name, the time, the description of Lily. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. "I believe you," he said simply. "Now I need to find the girl." For the next 48 hours, Keanu worked with a discretion that had served him well throughout his career. He visited homeless shelters across Los Angeles, not as a celebrity but as someone genuinely concerned. He spoke with outreach workers, showing them a sketch artist's rendering of Lily based on Sandra's description. At the 7th shelter, a youth center in East Los Angeles, the director recognized the girl immediately but was hesitant to share information. "We protect our kids' privacy here," Elena said firmly, arms crossed. "Especially with all this media circus." Keanu nodded respectfully. "I understand. I'm not looking to exploit her story. I'm trying to help my friend who's being crucified for an act of kindness." Something in his sincerity reached Elena. "I can't tell you if she's here or not," she said carefully. "But I can give her a message if I happen to see her." Meanwhile, Thomas Whitaker was enjoying his newfound fame. The restaurant had never been busier, with people coming in hoping to hear his first-hand account of catching Sandra Bullock in her publicity stunt. He had even hired an agent to explore book and movie rights to his story. What Whitaker didn't know was that one of his busboys, a college student named David, had been working that night and had seen something very different from what his boss described. David had watched Sandra approach the girl with genuine concern, had observed that there were no pre-positioned cameras, no security team arranging the scene. But with student loans to pay and rent due, he had kept silent as his boss spun increasingly elaborate lies. As the controversy entered its second week, a journalist named Priya Rahman began noticing inconsistencies in Whitaker's story. Why had his account grown more detailed with each telling? Why did the restaurant's security footage from that night mysteriously disappear? Following her instincts, she began digging deeper, interviewing restaurant staff when Whitaker wasn't around. David hesitated when Priya approached him after his shift. "I could lose my job," he said. "Or you could help correct an injustice," she replied. Across town, Keanu sat quietly in Elena's office as Lily cautiously entered the room. The girl was clearly terrified, her thin frame almost vibrating with anxiety. "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Keanu shook his head. "No. You're not in trouble. You're the only one who knows the truth about what happened that night. And the truth can help someone who tried to help you." Lily looked down at her worn sneakers. "The lady was nice to me. She didn't do anything wrong. But now everyone's looking for me, and I just want to disappear." "Sometimes," Keanu said gently, "the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. I know you're scared. But I have a plan that can help both you and Sandra, if you're brave enough to tell your story." 3 days later, Thomas Whitaker's restaurant hosted a special charity dinner event that had been hastily organized by a mysterious benefactor. The entire restaurant was booked for the evening, filled with social media influencers, local journalists, and several entertainment industry executives, all of whom had been particularly vocal about the Sandra Bullock controversy. The guests mingled, enjoying expensive champagne, unaware they had been specifically chosen for this gathering. At precisely 8 p.m., the lights dimmed, and Keanu Reeves walked into the center of the room. A hush fell over the crowd as they recognized the actor, known for avoiding public appearances. "Thank you all for coming," Keanu said, his voice quiet yet commanding. "I've invited you here because you've all played a role in a story that needs correction." He gestured to the door, where Sandra Bullock stood nervously. Whispers immediately rippled through the crowd as she walked in, her first public appearance since the controversy began. "Many of you have judged my friend Sandra based on assumptions, edited videos, and one man's testimony," Keanu continued. "Tonight, I want to introduce you to the complete truth." Priya Rahman stepped forward with David, the busboy, who shakily described what he had actually witnessed that night, Sandra spontaneously helping a hungry girl, with no cameras or planning involved. "My boss threatened my job if I spoke up," David admitted. "But I can't be part of this lie anymore." The crowd shifted uncomfortably as security footage appeared on the restaurant's screens, footage Thomas Whitaker had claimed was accidentally deleted. It clearly showed Sandra's genuine surprise at discovering Lily, contradicting every aspect of Whitaker's story. Whitaker himself stood frozen near the bar, his face ashen as his fabrications unraveled before his most profitable customers. But the most powerful moment came when Elena escorted Lily into the room. The teenager looked terrified but determined as she faced the crowd. "The lady, Sandra, she just wanted to help me," Lily said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "No one ever notices us on the streets. She did. She didn't know anyone was watching or filming. She just cared." Keanu placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "We're quick to assume the worst about people whose lives are public. We forget they're human beings capable of simple kindness without ulterior motives." He turned to address the social media influencers directly. "You have platforms that can destroy lives in minutes. With that power comes responsibility, to verify before you vilify. The room fell into a stunned silence as the full impact of their collective rush to judgment became clear. The aftermath of Keanu's intervention spread across social media with the same viral intensity as the original controversy, but with a crucial difference. This time, the truth led the way. Videos of Lily's testimony and David's confession quickly accumulated millions of views, with hashtags like #TruthForSandra and #KindnessMatters trending globally. Thomas Whitaker's reputation collapsed overnight. Former customers posted one-star reviews detailing his character, not his cuisine. Within a week, his restaurant stood nearly empty, a stark contrast to its recent buzz. Facing bankruptcy, he issued a public apology that few believed was genuine. For Sandra, the vindication brought mixed feelings. While relieved to have her name cleared, the experience had left deep wounds. It's devastating to realize how quickly people you've never met can decide you're something you're not, she told Priya Rahman in an exclusive interview. But this was never about me. It was about whether we still value kindness in our society. The most significant transformation occurred in Lily's life. Elena's shelter received an anonymous donation establishing a scholarship fund for homeless youth, with Lily as its first recipient. The teenager, who had dropped out of school 2 years earlier, now had a path toward education and stability. Several families offered to become her foster parents, carefully vetted by social workers to ensure they were motivated by compassion rather than connection to a now famous story. 1 month after the dinner event, Sandra invited Lily to her home for lunch. Away from cameras and public scrutiny, they shared a meal and conversation about Lily's future dreams of becoming a social worker. You know, Sandra said as they sat in her garden, sometimes the worst moments in our lives become doorways to something better. Lily nodded, her face healthier now, showing signs of regular meals and proper care. I never thought anyone would believe me over famous people and restaurant owners. Mr. Reeves said something I keep thinking about, that courage isn't about not being afraid, but about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. The public reaction to the controversy evolved into something unexpected, genuine self-reflection. On talk shows and in opinion pieces, discussions emerged about the ethics of smartphone recording, the responsibility of social media sharing, and society's eagerness to believe the worst about others. Keanu, characteristically, retreated from the spotlight once the truth was established. When asked about his intervention during an unrelated film premiere, he simply said, "We're all capable of both judgment and compassion. It's always worth taking an extra moment to choose the latter." The experience transformed Sandra's approach to her philanthropy. While still maintaining privacy around many of her donations, she also began openly advocating for homeless youth programs, turning a painful episode into meaningful action. Her movie, once predicted to fail, became a box office success, with many viewers explicitly citing their support for her character as their reason for attending. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the incident was invisible, countless small moments where people paused before sharing unverified stories online, where passers-by stopped to help rather than film those in need, where second chances were given instead of snap judgments made. As Lily began her first semester of high school that fall, something that had seemed impossible months earlier, she carried with her a simple but powerful lesson. In a world where it's easy to shame and hard to stand up, individual acts of courage can still change everything.